Last time, the village gathered around a woman whose body was in danger, a broken bone, a fever, a wound they could see, touch, and try to close. But what happened when the danger wasn't in the body at all? When someone's mind began experiencing a reality nobody else could share? A man begins hearing a voice no one else can hear. He stops sleeping. There is no psychiatrist, no diagnosis, no medicine, no word for what is happening to him. Is he sick, possessed, chosen, or dangerous? Picture the fire. The group is asleep around it. One man is not. Some nights, the voice seems wise. It warns of rain before the clouds arrive. It tells him where the herd will move. On those nights, the others lean in to listen. Other nights, the voice turns on him. He does not sleep for days. He lashes out at the people trying to help him. He frightens the children. The group watches from a distance, and nobody knows what to do, because there is no manual for this, and there won't be for another 10,000 years. The internet gives a simple answer: drill a hole in his skull to release the demon. Archaeology tells a far stranger and far more human story. What did ancient humans do with the mentally ill? It's one of the most misunderstood questions in human history, and almost every answer online is wrong. Wrong in a specific way. It takes a modern idea, mental illness, and drags it backwards into a world that had no such category at all. So tonight, every claim gets a label: documented, plausible, speculative, myth. When we know, we'll say we know. When we're guessing, we'll say we're guessing, because the honest answer is more fascinating than the internet version. Here's the insight the internet gets wrong. Ancient people did not respond to diagnoses. They had no diagnoses to respond to. They responded to behavior. Mental illness is a modern umbrella. Under it, we place dozens of completely different experiences: voice hearing, seizures, fever delirium, dementia, grief that won't lift, trauma, brain injury, the confusion of a poison or a plant. To us, they share a category. To a prehistoric group, they shared almost nothing. What mattered was not a name. It was a question. What is this person doing? And can we live alongside it? Same umbrella today, very different people underneath it. So imagine two people, both hearing a voice. The first is calm. He still hunts. He still shares what he catches. He still carries his weight when the group moves. His voice, whatever it is, doesn't stop him being useful, and it sometimes seems to help. A person like that might have been treated with curiosity, even reverence. Now the second. He attacks the people around him. He can't be left with children. He can't feed himself, or he wanders off, or he won't stop screaming in the dark. That is not a spiritual mystery to the group. That is a practical emergency. Same label today, different behaviors then, different outcomes. That gap between the calm voice and the dangerous one is the whole story. And the first thing people cite is the skull with the hole. Trepanation. People deliberately cutting, scraping, or drilling a hole into a living person's skull. It's real. It's ancient. It's found on every inhabited continent, from Europe to South America to the Pacific. Thousands of examples across thousands of years. And here's the part the internet gets spectacularly wrong. Let's start with what we actually know. Documented, holes were deliberately cut, scraped, or drilled into living skulls. We can tell the difference between a wound and a procedure by the tool marks and the technique. Documented. Some people survived. The bone healed around the opening, smoothing over in a way that only happens in the living. In some prehistoric populations, trepanation appears with surprising frequency, but, and this matters, the rate varied enormously between places and periods. There is no single global number, and anyone who gives you one is selling certainty the evidence doesn't support. Now the part that should genuinely stop you. In some archaeological samples, most of the openings show signs of healing. Healing means the person didn't die on the spot. They lived long enough for bone to begin rebuilding itself around the hole. No anesthesia, no sterile technique, no antibiotics, no understanding of infection at all. Someone opened a living human skull with a stone or a metal edge, and the patient walked away. We cannot say how many survived in every time and place. The samples are patchy. But survival was real, and in some places it was common. That is documented. So why did they do it? The internet says to release demons. Label, myth. The evidence points somewhere more impressive. In some populations, the openings sit right next to cranial injuries, fractures, dents, the marks of a blow to the head. That placement supports a surgical explanation. Here's the logic. A depressed fracture presses a splinter of bone inward onto the brain. That pressure can cause confusion, seizures, paralysis, rage. Cut a hole nearby and you can lift the bone out, drain the trapped blood, relieve the pressure. Think of it as the world's oldest emergency room. No paperwork, no waiting room. Just a sharp stone and someone brave enough or desperate enough to use it. But we have to be honest about the limits of that story. Plausible, some procedures treated head trauma, pain, or seizures. Plausible too. In other cases, ritual or symbolic motives were the real reason, opening the skull to let something in or out in. A sense we'll never fully recover. Speculative, and this is the exact leap the internet makes without evidence, that particular holes were cut to treat hallucinations or disturbed behavior. The hole is documented. The reason is often simply missing. A skull can tell us that something was done. It rarely tells us why. And here's what makes it genuinely fascinating. Some of it may have accidentally worked. Picture a man kicked in the head by an animal. Now he's confused, aggressive, seizing, behaving to the group exactly like someone whose mind has broken. They open the skull, they relieve the pressure, and he improves. Not because a demon left, because the pressure did. They may have solved a real physical brain injury problem without understanding the biology the way we do. The right treatment for reasons they could not have known. Like fixing a leaky roof before anyone had invented the idea of rain. So the tidy internet story, hearing voices got you a hole in your skull to release the demon, is mostly wrong on both ends. Not every voice hearer was trepanned, most surely never were. And trepanation wasn't mainly about voices, the clearest cases are about injury. The internet took a real, sophisticated surgical tradition and flattened it into a horror story. The truth is more impressive than the myth. So if it wasn't just skull drilling, what actually happened to the man by the fire? That's the question this whole video exists to answer. When did a person who heard voices become a healer? And when did they become a threat? Why does the same experience end in a place of honor in one story and beyond the firelight in another? The answer lives in one word, behavior, and one question. Could the group make sense of what they were seeing? First, the frame, because it matters more than the stories that follow. What I'm about to describe are modern ethnographic cases. They are not evidence of what prehistoric people believed. We can't interview the dead. They matter for one reason only. They show, in the present, how a community's interpretation can completely change the social meaning of an unusual experience. In one widely reported case, a young man in Tibet began hearing voices. He felt ill, confused. He thought he was dying, until a mentor interpreted the experience not as sickness, but as a calling, and trained him, over time, into a recognized ritual role. Other accounts describe people whose visions were guided into accepted roles by relatives or elders rather than treated as illness. The point is not that every voice hearer became a shaman. Most did not. The point is that interpretation shaped what happened next. Hold those cases next to each other and something powerful appears. The same crisis, the same voices, the same terror of a mind that won't obey. In one culture, the response is, you have a gift. In another, the response is, you have a disorder. A mentor who names the experience. A community willing to believe it. A role that gives the whole thing a shape and a purpose. That can be the difference between a healer and an outcast. Not the voice itself, but the story wrapped around it. The story the group told changed what it actually felt like to be you. Now, researchers have long tried to find the line between the two, and they've sometimes looked at things like this. Can the person enter the unusual state deliberately? Can they come back from it? Can they function afterwards? Can they be helped to recover? But be careful. These are clues, not a test of character or worth. A trained ritual specialist could still at times become distressed, impaired, even dangerous. And a person with involuntary frightening voices could still be treated with patience and dignity. The boundary was never clean, and it never sorted people neatly into saints and threats. Still, control, recovery, and the ability to keep a place in the group may well have shaped how others responded. And here's the most striking part. The story didn't just change how a group reacted. It may have changed the experience itself. An anthropologist and her team interviewed people who heard voices in different countries. In the American group, the voices were more often described as intrusive, violent, threatening, strangers who would not shut up. In the groups studied in Ghana and India, the voices were more often described as familiar, sometimes even companionable, a relative, a moral, guide. Similar experiences described very differently across the cultures studied. Expectations and relationships can shape how the voices are experienced. The audience for the voice mattered, perhaps as much as the voice. So did ancient humans care for their vulnerable? There's evidence they did, but we have to read it honestly without turning bones into a fairy tale. The Shanidar man, a Neanderthal found in Iraq, one arm withered and likely unusable, partly blind, worn down by severe arthritis. His survival with such serious impairments has often been interpreted as evidence of sustained assistance, that others helped him eat, move, endure. Although researchers genuinely debate how dependent he actually was. Romito II, in Italy, survived into adolescence with skeletal abnormalities that scholars have read in more than one way. Together, cases like these suggest that some people with serious impairments receive support. That much the bones can reasonably tell us. But here's the caveat that keeps us honest. Care for an injured body is not the same as knowing how a group treated a troubled mind. A healed arm proves someone was fed and protected while they could not fend for themselves. It does not tell us what happened when someone became violent or slipped out of the reality everyone else was sharing. A broken bone is patient. It doesn't frighten the children. It doesn't wake the camp screaming. The archaeology shows care existed. It does not show that care was universal or that it extended to the hardest cases, because it wasn't always care. Ethnographic and historical accounts show that restraint, separation, and expulsion have all occurred in many different times and places. Put yourself in the group. A person attacks others, endangers the children, can't keep pace when the band must move to survive, draws predators with noise in the night. That is not an abstract moral puzzle. It's a practical emergency in a world with no walls, no locks, and no spare food. Prehistoric archaeology rarely tells us exactly what happened to such a person, but the fear was real, and the choices were hard in a way we rarely have to imagine. So the honest answer isn't one fate, it's a range of possibilities. Some may have become ritual specialists, the voice reframed as a gift. Some may have remained family, included, protected, given tasks they could manage. Some may have been restrained or isolated when they became a danger. And in the hardest cases, some may have been driven out or killed. Prehistoric evidence rarely lets us assign a specific fate to a specific person. The same individual, in a different group, in a different season, could have met an entirely different end. But let me argue for the fate we're least likely to imagine, and that may have been the most common. Many nonviolent people may simply have remained family members, fed, cared for, given manageable work, included without ever being treated at all, not cured, not celebrated, not feared, just kept, just part of the group. There's no diagnosis in that, no ritual, no exile. Just a brother who is a little different, a grandmother whose mind has wandered, a cousin who talks to someone who isn't there. That's plausible. Label it plausible, not documented, but it may have been the quiet, unremarkable, most common fate of all. And then everything changes because writing appears. For the first time, we don't have to guess from bones. For the first time, we hear what people believed about the mind in their own words and what they actually did about it. And the record, it turns out, is even stranger than the cave. In ancient Mesopotamia, mental distress was a kind of spiritual accounting problem. The Babylonians called it the hand of a god. The logic was simple and terrifying. You had angered a deity or a ghost, and now you were paying the debt. So who did you call? Not a doctor as we'd know one, a priest, and a shipu. Think of them as the first detectives of the human mind. They examined symptoms, dreams, and behavior, and cross-referenced them against clay tablets cataloging which offenses brought which afflictions. And their notes were strikingly detailed, descriptions with patterns that, to a modern reader, can resemble depression, mania, or epilepsy. Though we can't impose our labels on them, they weren't looking for the same things we are. They were trying. They were careful. They just had the wrong suspect. And here's the nuance the internet almost always misses. Magic and medicine were not opposites, not enemies, not rivals. They were partners. A symptom could be blamed on a ghost, while the treatment was a real prepared substance mixed and applied as a bandage or a draft. The incantation and the bandage weren't two competing options. They were one treatment. Ancient people simply didn't split the spiritual from the physical the way we've been trained to. To them, healing the soul and healing the body were the same job. Egypt gives us some of the earliest surviving medical writing of all. The Ebers Papyrus, compiled around 1550 BCE, refers to bodily and emotional distress, including a striking phrase, a heaviness of the heart. Modern readers may compare that with depression, but be careful. It is a resonance across 3,500 years, not a diagnosis. Egyptian healing wove together remedies, rest, ritual, and religious meaning. They didn't experience those as separate departments. And in later centuries, not in the Ebers era itself, temple traditions associated with the deified healer Imhotep developed their own healing practices, possibly including sleeping in the temple precinct in hope of a healing dream. It was not a modern psychiatric program. We shouldn't dress it up as one. But the intent to help, to soothe a heavy heart, was unmistakably real. Then comes Greece, and with it, two rival frameworks that would argue for centuries. Framework 1, madness was divine. Plato wrote of 4 divine madnesses: prophetic, ritual, poetic, and erotic. In that view, the mad person wasn't broken. They had access to truths the merely sensible could never reach. So the gods' hotline to humanity? Sometimes it looked like a voice in your head. Framework 2, Hippocrates. Yes, the oath guy. In the text, on the sacred disease, he rejected a purely supernatural explanation for epilepsy. The cause, he argued, was in the body, an imbalance of the 4 humors. Too much black bile, for instance, and you turned melancholic. The mechanism was completely wrong. But the instinct was revolutionary, a naturalistic way of explaining what everyone else was calling divine. From here, later societies built both care and control, often at the same time. Rome created legal categories that could strip a person of their rights and property. In medieval Guile, in Belgium, families took in and fostered people considered mentally disturbed, a community tradition that still echoes there today. In parts of the medieval Islamic world, hospitals treated mental disturbance alongside other illness within a rich medical tradition that included Avicenna. Then came institutions like Bedlam in London, where the public once paid to watch the patients. The famous chain removal at Bicêtre, associated with Pinel, was real in spirit, though embellished in the retelling. Later treatments helped many, others caused real harm. Asylums grew until they became warehouses, then were emptied, often without the community care that was supposed to replace them. The lesson is not that history marched from cruelty to kindness. Knowledge, compassion, coercion, and neglect kept right on existing side by side. That's a whole other story, and it isn't the one you came for. And one honest note about today before we go back. A former head of America's National Institute of Mental Health argued that years of research investment had not translated into better outcomes for most people at the scale that had been hoped for. His point was not that treatment never helps, it does, and recovery is real, and if you are struggling, help is worth seeking. His point was that access, continuity of care, housing, and social support keep falling short. We know more about the brain than any generation before us, But knowledge all by itself has never once guaranteed humane care. That gap between what we know and how we treat each other is not new. One warning before we return to the fire: we cannot diagnose a prehistoric person with schizophrenia. The name itself belongs to 20th century psychiatry. Bleuler coined it in 1908. It describes patterns we see now. It does not travel backwards through time. A skull, a story, an unusual burial, none of it is a diagnosis. Retrospective diagnosis of the dead is how history quietly lies to itself. So, back to him. The man by the fire. Imagine two possible endings. In one, the voice warns him about the rain, and it comes. He still hunts, still shares his food, still helps carry the young when the band moves. People begin to ask him what he sees before a journey. His difference becomes a role. In the other, the voice keeps him awake for nights on end. He lashes out, the children are kept away from him, and the group, frightened and exhausted, restrains him, separates him, or decides there is no longer a place for him beyond the fire. We can't know which ending belonged to any real person who ever lived, but the pattern is clear. Behavior, relationships, belief, and hard practical limits shape the response. Not a diagnosis, never a diagnosis. So, what did ancient humans do with the mentally ill? There is no single answer because humanity never had a single response. A person who heard voices could become a healer, could remain a brother, a daughter, a friend, could be restrained, feared, or driven away into the dark. The response depended on what the behavior actually did, what the group believed, and what the group could afford. And here's the uncomfortable truth we'd rather not sit with. The same is still true today. At the beginning of this story, one man sat by a fire, hearing a voice no one else could hear. We don't know what happened to him. We can't. The evidence simply won't tell us. But we do know what mattered. And it wasn't a hospital. History preserved the hospitals, the asylums, the theories, the labels. It did not preserve most of what ancient communities actually did, because most of it was done quietly by families around fires like this one. But we know this much. Some were helped, some were honored, some were simply kept, and some were cast out. Before hospitals, before diagnoses, before a single treatment manual was ever written, care began with the people around the fire. And whether they made room, subscribe for more stories about the mismatch between your ancient body and your modern world. The group could make room for a troubled mind, but it could not outrun a wolf. Or could it? Next time on The Old Human, why ancient humans would have died without animals, the dogs that let us sleep, the horses that carried us, the prey that outran us until we learned to outrun them. The fire is still burning. This is The Old Human.